Welcome to Gracefully Greying. I am Laurie Blume, co-founder of Gracefully Greying, along with Henry Gornbein. And Gracefully Greying is a hub and resource platform and venue for discussion for social, economic, lifestyle, health, well-being, everything related to the 50 and over demographic. Today, we are very pleased to have Annabel Cohen of Annabel Cohen Cooks Detroit, wonderful chef, caterer, lifestyle, author, just all around great person. And Annabel, welcome to Gracefully Greying.
Thank you. Nice to see everybody.
Nice to see
Nobody,
you.
just Laurie.
To have you as a guest.
Nice to be here.
First of all, we would like to know what your background is, what got you into what you're doing now, and tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, my family is from Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and we moved here when I was a young girl, and my mom always loved to entertain. She's a painter, she's a poet. She's very, very cultured and interesting. And she would always have parties growing up. Until very recently, she would have a big summer fete on the lake. And so I grew up in a home with parties and company, very social. And I always loved to cook. I was one of those, if I was a kid today, I would be on one of those chopped shows. I always would have dinner parties in high school. Loved to cook, but my parents were not supportive of cooking. They wanted me to go to college and get a real degree and get a real job, which I did. I worked in advertising and marketing, believe it or not, for 23 years. And when I was 26, I quit my job. I thought it was so old to be starting a new career, and working at Campbell Ewald as a writer. And I quit my job and I decided to become a caterer. And I literally just did it with no knowledge, just sort of jumping into the water, and it was hugely successful. I was very, very lucky. And somewhere down the road, I went back into advertising and did catering sort of on the side. And that was, it was great. It was great. It continues to be great. Now with the pandemic, catering is slowed down a lot, but it's beginning to open up again. But everything is a little bit different, more intimate, more socially distanced, more individual items rather than buffets, which is a little bit of a shame because I specialize in the buffet. Again, my mom's an artist, so I grew up around art. And so I like to make my food look like art. I always say you can get a piece of chicken anywhere.
That's great. There's the old saying that some people eat to live, other people live to eat. You've obviously been around food all of your life and, you're so wonderful at it. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm definitely a live to eat kind of person. I always joke that when the time comes, I want to have an eating will when I can no longer enjoy food. I can pull that plug. We grew up in a family of very sophisticated eaters. And so the eating is really, really important to me. In fact, when I travel, which is a lot, not so much this year, but I've traveled around the world and hope to continue my travels. Eating is my entertainment. I'd rather buy a good meal than a souvenir. And it's funny because I have to make sure that I travel with people who feel the same way I do. Otherwise, it's not fun. They don't understand that eating for me is not only my vocation, it's my avocation, it's my entertainment, it's my golf. And it's super, super important. And interestingly, when I eat at restaurants, though, I tend to choose a little bit more simply because I can pretty much make anything I want. But the opposite is true when I go to travel around the world. I love to eat on the streets and have the local food that people are eating. And I like to bring back those flavors and incorporate them into my catering and in my cooking classes.
Right. Which I know that you're doing a lot of right now. What are some of your favorite dishes to cook? I mean, I know that you're typically your clients would pick off of your menu and, you will work with them and customize that. But what are some of your favorite dishes that you like to cook?
Well, I love to cook Brazilian food because it's my heritage, and it's not easy to find around here. That's very good. So my favorite dishes are the peasant foods of Brazil: black beans and rice, called feijoada, the different fish stews, and I also like foods from my heritage. My father's parents were from Turkey, from Istanbul, so I like to incorporate all of those sort of Arabic and Middle Eastern and Eurasian. Foods into my repertoire too. If I could, if people gave me free will to do whatever their menus, whatever I wanted to do, then I would also incorporate some of my other flavors, favorite flavors, Indian flavors, Asian flavors. I can do that sometimes, but when you're doing a party for 100 people, you have to be a little bit more generic. That's where the presentation comes in. I mentioned earlier that I always say you can get a piece of chicken anywhere, but I like to make everything look really beautiful, and I create these elaborate tablescapes out of flowers and greens and vegetables and fruits, and so the food becomes sort of the table, not necessarily just on the table. You know, Frank Lloyd Wright said that he didn't build a house on a hill; he built a house of the hill. And rather than have just a flat buffet with chafing dishes and platters, I like to elevate things and incorporate greenery, so you can't tell where the food begins and where the table begins. Everything is sort of very, very opulent and not necessarily expensive. I tend to use, people don't even realize what they even have in their houses. So I tend to use things that the owners of the homes already own, and then I incorporate nature. And nature can be any one of ways. It can be burlap is a texture on a table. It can be branches from someone's trees. I always tell people that I don't charge for their tree trimming when I include branches on the table.
I have been lucky enough to see, many of your events and many of your dinners, and they're also amazing. And I know that the adornment of it all and the decoration of it all it's just as delicious as the food. I mean, how far and wide do you go to get these, additions and stylizations for your tables? I mean, you're such a visual person. It's like you're on a hunt for cool stuff.
I've gone into people's bathrooms. I've gone into their closets, and with their permission. But sometimes I don't go any further than their own backyards to trim branches and things. And it's interesting because you never get the same thing twice. And a lot of times I shoot from the hip. In fact, I do have some clients who are very, very controlled in the way they think, and they want to see how everything's going to look ahead of time, which is sort of clipping my wings, because I may be thinking one thing, and then I come to a house and someone's got these gorgeous branches that have no leaves on them, or have dying leaves on them, or it's autumn and they've got red and orange and green leaves. And so I change my mind at the last minute. It's always sort of a surprise. Really, my clients, they have to absolutely trust me, because if they don't trust me, they're not going to be happy, because they'll be too nervous. But my clients, since my business is all word of mouth, usually they've been to a party before and they like what they see. And so I have to understand, and I try to explain to them as best I can, that you just have to trust me. It's going to look good. It's going to taste good. It's going to look good. I don't do tastings, and I can't tell you what your party's going to look like ahead of time. Of course, like I said before, the people who want their parties done ahead of time, I don't think they're nearly as creative as the ones at the last minute. Sometimes I'll go to someone's house a week before and I'll lay out platters and dishes and whatever, and I'll take a picture of it so that we can recreate it. I don't think that this is fun. I like to be very spontaneous. It's my personality.
Totally. Spontaneity is, it definitely works for you. And creativity is always there. As you're based around the Detroit metropolitan area, tell us what you think about, the food, the scene around Detroit, how, and I know you've been involved in a lot of events, food related. Detroit is up and coming, until obviously the coronavirus has kind of put a halt on everything. But what's your feeling about the food and the food scene in Detroit?
You know what? I never thought Detroit would come back in my lifetime, and I'm so thrilled that it has. It's such a treat to go downtown and in the surrounding areas. And there's so much good food everywhere. Unfortunately, you're right that a lot of the restaurants are having to switch things up a little bit. A lot of them have gone out of business. It's really a shame. The I'm not sure if you know this, but catering and restaurants are completely different. A lot of caterers are not good restaurateurs, and a lot of restaurateurs are not good caterers. It's easy to make not easy, it's difficult, but it's one talent to make a plate look beautiful with food on it, and it's another talent to make a platter of food look beautiful. And a lot of times those don't meet. Recently, I've offered sort of a new service that's not even on my website, but it's something that I've talked to people about, where people could order from their favorite restaurants, and I'll come in and make it look pretty. I'll pick up the food. I'll make it look pretty. So that way you can get some of your favorite burgers from Green Dot Stables, and I'll make them look like $1 million. Because trust me, I've been to a lot of buffets that are hosted by catered by restaurants, and the food is always delicious, but oftentimes they're served in an aluminum pan. And you eat first with your eyes. So I like to take everybody else's game up a bit to the next level, and so that way people can have some of that great food that they love from the restaurants downtown done my way. It's a good synergy. But yeah, it's really exciting. I love it. I love that there aren't enough restaurants. There's so many restaurants that you can't possibly go to them all. But I do have favorites. I'm not going to necessarily talk about those, but I'm a pretty simple eater. What I like more than food is great atmosphere. And that we have in spades. And it's really, really so exciting what's going on.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Given your reputation in our community, and people will see this all over, not just the Detroit area, but what can you give as advice about maintaining, you have a loyal following, you have loyal clients that come back to you. Everybody wants to use Annabel. You have the reputation. And what advice can you give to people, whether they're just starting out, whether they are gracefully graying, our age, whether they're, starting a new second career, things are changing right now. What advice can you give people? Because obviously you've done it very well.
Well, if you're gracefully graying, you shouldn't be getting into the catering business. It's really, really heavy, dirty, hard work with very long hours. Restaurant business is also terrible. But catering, you have got to make this food. You've got to load it up in the van, sometimes when it's 20 below zero in the winter at 6 a.m. And you've got to take it somewhere, keep it safe, set it up, serve it, and then take it all back with you. It could make for very, very long, heavy days. And even though I have a lot of a lot of wonderful helpers, it's still for the owner, it's a lot of heavy lifting. And that's sort of hard to do. The COVID crisis came actually at a sort of good time for me. I mentioned earlier that all my business is word of mouth, and I've been so, so lucky. I joke, but half joke, that I turn down business every single day. Not so much now because there isn't as much business, but there's if you do a good job and you really care and you do what you say and you say what you do and you manage other people's expectations and just care, I think it shows. I think passion shows. And I think people like that I'm passionate about their parties. I always feel like they're my own parties. And so I want to make them, they're all a reflection of me. It's like, you insult my food, you insult my family. So yeah. You really have to be super, super passionate. So graying gracefully came really at an opportune time in COVID because I was hoping to slow down a bit. So instead of doing big events, I'm doing smaller events. But what that does is make me very, very nimble. So if you're not nimble, if you're the kind of person who really has to go out every Saturday night and do a lot of socializing, then catering is not for you. Restaurants aren't for you. None of that. Because you are working when everybody else is playing. So what I'm trying to do is sort of play as I work. So if you don't have that sort of temperament, and if you don't have amazing patience, you're going to be very, very unhappy because you can get beat up quickly because you're dealing with a lot of people's opinions. My clientele is very, very sophisticated as well, and well-to-do, and they have very high expectations. And if you make a misstep, you really better be ready to correct yourself. You can't be at all arrogant or boastful or have a lot of bravado, because your client is your boss.
Yeah.
Even though you're your own boss. So you've got to definitely, if you want to do anything to do with food, I suggest you work at whatever it is you want to do for 6 months. If you want to be a baker, work at a bakery for 6 months. If you want to be a caterer, work for a caterer for 6 months, and let them know what you're doing. I want to start. You know what? I always say there's enough pie for everybody. I'm not challenged by people who want to open the same business as I do. There's room for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when you put on these events, I mean, there could be 10 people, there could be 300 people, and that's a lot of pressure on you. And it's not only, you know, the visuals, the taste, it's the timing of it all. It's the people that are helping you. I mean, that is a lot of pressure.
It is. There's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah,
and they all have to come together.
Yeah. So here's a question: do you consider yourself an influencer?
I don't know. I am always surprised that people care about anything that I think. And I think I always say, oh my gosh, my life is so boring. But people have said I'm an influencer. I'm always, I teach a lot of classes. I give every secret away. I've been a food writer for 30 years. And in all the local papers, I give out every recipe. I don't leave out an ingredient. I'm always really proud when someone takes a class and said, look what I made. And they send me a picture. You know, if that's being an influencer, then perhaps I am, but I love it. I have a lot of ideas. It's not a finite trove of ideas. There's always something else, something new.
I would say that the community does consider you an influencer, and obviously there's good reason for that. And I know that you've traveled a lot in the world, and I just want you to share with everyone your story about going to Japan, if you would.
Well, I don't do it so much now, but for a long time, every time I went on a big trip, I'm not talking about just going to New York or something, but going overseas, I did a blog. And my first blog was when I went to Japan. I had heard that you could buy anything you wanted from vending machines in Japan, anything you need in the world. That for every 23 people, there's a vending machine. You could be hiking on a mountain in a remote area, and there'll be a vending machine. And I'm sure a lot of those vending machines are, soft drinks or cigarettes or whatever. But you can also buy flowers or rice or underwear. There's a lot of things you can buy from a vending machine. So I decided to go to Japan, and I only took my purse. Just my purse and the contents of my purse. And I took a laptop because I wanted to blog about it. So I did a blog called Vend for My Life. And I was in Japan for 9 days, and I blogged every day. I only did things that I could do with vending machines. When I got to the airport, I went to an ATM and I got money out from an ATM, which is pretty much a vending machine for money. And from then I only took subways and I did eat food from restaurants, because I'm a foodie and I wanted to eat everything, but I did a lot of stuff from vending machines. So I didn't find a lot of things I was looking for. I literally wore the same clothes for 9 days. I would sort of rinse them out at night and put them back on. And but it was a great, great trip. It's called Vend for My Life. I think it's still out there, the blog. And it was picked up around the world. Somehow it got people's imaginations. And there were articles written about me. I was in vending machine magazines, trade magazines, and it was just really interesting and fun. And that started sort of my whole blogging during my travels. I went to Italy, and I worked at a restaurant for a month in Rome, and I blogged it for free. I worked for free. It was really fun and a lot of work. And my blog was called Rome on the Range. And then I did one when I went to India, called Who's Sorry Now, taking first-class trains for a little bit and then hiring a driver to drive all around. I was with a friend and had just the most amazing trip. I cooked in Rio de Janeiro for a month at a restaurant for fun as well, and I called that blog Copacabana Bell. So I've had a lot of fun with these different blogs going all over and writing about travel, and of course they all include food.
Yeah, and obviously when I hear you talking, I mean, these titles, and you're so creative, and this it just spills over into everything that you do, which is so amazing. So speaking about traveling, you talk about dumplings, pierogi, dim sum, ravioli. I mean, wherever in the world you are, it could be the same kind of food, similar food, but obviously.
Yes. I every time I eat something, I take notes, if not mental notes, real notes. And, I think I make a great tagine. I think I make great Indian food. And I love ethnic flavors. I like spices. I like salty things and tart things. So it really works out well. And so I'd like to bring back all those flavors that we're talking about and incorporate them in one way or another. I could be making an omelet, and maybe I'll have cilantro and hot peppers and eggplant in that omelet. So it doesn't. I'm not limited to an ethnicity of a certain food. Of course, an omelet is a French recipe, but once I play with it, it's global.
Yeah,
I love the world. And during the pandemic, when I was staying with my mom for 2 months in Florida, and I cooked for her 7 days a week. I became something that I never did before. I'm not schooled. I didn't go to the Culinary Institute. I learned on the streets how to cook, and I started cooking with yeast, and I became, like the rest of America, rest of the world, a great yeast baker. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. As everybody's getting into that. So, they say
you haven't gone through the pandemic if you haven't made banana bread.
Exactly. Right. Or a sourdough starter.
Oh, I've got sourdough starter.
Yeah. So as far as Gracefully Greying, I mean, your career could be shifting a little bit right now. Obviously you've mentioned a few changes that you've had to make. Any frustrations now, or, I mean, you're excited about moving forward and, whatever the world brings?
Well, people are doing foods that are more individual, which means they're served in little cups or little bowls or Chinese food containers. They're getting away from that big buffet. I hope that comes back. There's a little bit of a frustration that I'm not able to do so much of that, because I think that's literally half the battle with my cooking. The food is delicious, I hope, but that's only half. The other half is the presentation. That's something. And then the other thing is, I'm not busy enough. So I'm sort of reinventing myself. I feel like I'm always reinventing myself. Mm-hmm. I'm doing a lot more Zoom cooking classes. I do them for charity. I do them for private classes. I do them from parties. Some are demos where I'm cooking and you're watching, and the other, I've got 24 people and we're all cooking along, and I'm looking at yours and making sure you're doing a good job, and every people are asking me questions. So I'm like part of that gig economy. And that's, I think, happens a lot for people who are graying. You may quit your full-time job, but then you pick up a lot of other little jobs to sort of fill in. And so that's what I'm doing, basically. I'm sort of reinventing myself to sort of cobble together a career. I have to work for a living. I'm not an independently wealthy person. I always joke that I'm independently poor. But I have to work for a living. So I'm doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and I'm putting together a different kind of career, which is better because it gives me a lot more flexibility for A, travel, if I ever get to travel again. Right. B, it's hard to be on your feet for 60, 70 hours a week, cooking food, delivering food, setting things up. It's I think the pandemic has made me not lazy, but when you're not so busy, if you don't use it, you lose it. So I don't have that same kind of energy.
Right.
So.
And, I feel like, when you're giving your virtual cooking classes now, that's kind of, and people could be anywhere, as we know.
Yeah, I could be anywhere. They could be anywhere. I can be anywhere.
What kind of tips can you give? Obviously you're a professional cook, but, most people aren't. So what kind of great tips could you give people right now as far as how they cook, or efficiency, or shopping, or whatever kind of professional advice? I'm sure people would welcome that.
Well, what I do now, I used to buy quantities of things, huge jugs of spices and 180 eggs at one time. Some of the advice is, unless you really know, buy just exactly what you need. Be more sort of almost like European. I know people don't want to go out into the markets, but the Europeans, they shop every day for what they need. Buy things that you need. And then the classic rule is to have all of your ingredients ready to go. That way, if you have like a little bowl of lemon juice that was supposed to go into something, you realize that it's missing, you can always sort of add it. That's called mise en place, which means having all your ingredients, everything ready to go. Yeah. If you need to remember it, you can just say something in English, like put your mess in place. And so get all your ingredients together. People have a lot more time than ever, interestingly. And rather than turning on the television to watch TV, pull up a YouTube or find something you've always wanted to make, right? And just go for it. I mean, and trust me, even though, oh yeah, for sure. But even the most experienced cook will make a mistake now and again, right? But yeah, cook with your family, incorporate them. There will be little helpers, your unpaid helpers, and people are rediscovering that it isn't as difficult to cook because most people are not eating elaborate Asian meals that require all kinds of different ingredients. They're eating a piece of fish, right? Some sort of a potato, a vegetable, a salad. They're eating simpler foods because those are the foods you eat every day.
They could keep it simple. Yeah.
Yes.
So we only have a few more seconds left, actually.
Okay.
What are your final thoughts? We were so thrilled to have spoken to you. You're a gem. What are some final thoughts?
You know what? I'm going to talk a little bit about cooking. Cooking is everything. First of all, everybody eats. That's my slogan. It's been my slogan for years. Everybody eats. No matter where I go in the world, everybody seems to be eating. If they're lucky, they're eating. And something about doing it yourself, ownership, instant gratification. Those are really, really great feelings. Growing a tomato, you can buy a tomato for $1.99 a pound, but you can grow a tomato, and that's way more satisfying than buying that tomato. And the same thing with cooking. And when you cook, if you don't like something, you leave it out. You don't like rosemary, leave it out. Put something else in. Put in basil. You can be super, super creative. It's not that hard. And like you said, if you get your family involved and have them chopping or washing dishes, if it's not fun, it's not worth doing. So you'll discover that it's a lot more fun, and you're a lot better cook than you think you are. And of course, if you can read, you can cook, right? Anybody can follow a recipe. But the other thing is, the last little bit of advice is, as you're cooking, taste. People will say a soup is boring or bland. I mean, the cure for blandness is salt. So the more you do, the more you learn, the easier it becomes. And when it's easy and fun and delicious, that's the perfect package.
Yeah. Well said. Coming from you. So we thank you for joining us. And that is this edition of Gracefully Greying with Annabel Cohen. Please
who's way over 50,
not way over 50. Anyway, we are the same age, actually. But anyway, enjoy our video and like us and share us on social media. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Gracefully Greying. Thank you, Annabel.